So hi everyone, yeah, I see people coming to the event now. So thank you and well done for finding this part of the Hopin platform on the day when Hopin, like a few other websites, went down for a little while. Amazon was not a brand I was thinking I was going to be mentioning at this event, so but there you go. They were taken offline as well. But no, thank you for being here today. And yeah, Gina's just put in the chat before we introduce our guests. We're running a poll for this session, and we'll run the second poll later on. People can take that by clicking on the poll option. If you click on session chat and then you go into poll, you should then be able to see it. If you go on events, you won't, because it's a poll specifically for within this session. So community wealth building has a number of benefits. Which of these do you feel is most important to the region right now? You got one of 4 options. The 4th one being the most complicated, because you're then required to do some thinking and put it in the chat. But do take the poll if you see that. So yeah, you click on the session, the 2 tabs at the top, event session, and click on polls and take that, and we'll share the results later on. So it'd be really good for people to introduce themselves and do a better job than me. So Chris, please could you introduce yourself, please, to our audience today?
Hi, I'm Chris Gunson, and I'm one of the directors of Local Spark Torbay Community Supported Enterprise. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Karl.
Hi, yeah, I'm the Managing Director for Yeo Valley Properties Limited, and I'm also the Chair of the Heart of Southwest LEP.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And Stuart.
I am Chief Executive of Applegate, which is a procurement company, and also running SupplyDevon.
And yeah, thanks everyone. And I'm Dan Pritchard. I run a PR marketing agency, Astley Media, and I'm also co-founder of Tech Southwest, regional tech cluster, working across the whole of the Southwest for different parts of it. And we use Hopin quite a bit for online events. And just very briefly, if people haven't used Hopin before, if you're experiencing any issues, the best thing really is just to close it down and come back in that original link. It works best on Chrome and Firefox. You can use the chat on the right-hand side. We are using the main event tab on the top. So you click on events and in chat, you'll see people putting things on there. Do introduce yourselves if you've got things to say, if you've got questions for our panel, resources, links, that kind of thing. Gina's going to be putting a few in there as well that are relevant to the conversation. And for those who just joined, there's a poll running as well. For that, you'll need to slide across to click on the sessions tab and then click on poll and take that. So this event with SupplyDevon, it's all about community wealth building, and of course that means many different things to many different people, which is why we've got 2 panels, a lovely mix of people with different interests in this whole area, and it could spiral off in all sorts of directions, which is all part of the fascination of it, of course. But it's without doubt an increasing area of focus for our communities, and you know, one of the big things is around the Southwest and Devon and the wider region in terms of how well placed are we to take advantage, understand it, and bring about, I guess, decisive change around it. So I'm going to start with big picture by going to Karl and really asking kind of, you know, we've had a bit of a crazy 15, 16 months, you know, for this now in terms of ratcheting up the agenda, I suppose, and playing in this way. But what's the economic situation right now in the region? And why is it important that we look to support the Southwest economy through community wealth building?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, thanks. Yes, it's been an interesting 18 months, as you say. The economy has suffered, obviously, particularly within tourism, hospitality, food service, etc. And they're starting to come back now, but we've lost a significant amount of revenue, particularly in tourism and hospitality, where you can't get it back. Once it's gone, it's gone. Every night lost is a night lost. We've got a lot of people still on furlough who are out there. At the same time, we've got a very tightening labour market, particularly within the hospitality sector. There has been a bit of an exodus from the UK, particularly for our Eastern European colleagues who've been working over here, and that's making the labour market very tight, which is going to potentially drive up wages and inflation, etc. Other bits of the region have been doing okay. Manufacturing has been reasonably resilient, which is encouraging. Agriculture and food has been resilient. A lot of the people who are focused on retail markets have benefited because everybody's been staying at home and eating, so they've been buying a lot more product through that route. If businesses were focused on food service and hospitality, then obviously they've had a bit of a trickier time, but a lot of those have been repurposing and trying to break into different markets. So yeah, it's been a difficult picture. I think we will start to see recovery come through. Obviously, everybody's waiting for the announcement next Monday of what's likely to happen on the 21st, whether there'll be a complete unlocking. I'm not sure what the answer will be to that question yet, but hopefully we're going to see a resurgence. I was speaking to a friend of mine last night who runs a shoe shop in Wells, and he said last week was like Christmas for him. So there's certainly been a build-up of demand which people couldn't spend their money. So I mean, there is talks of 40 billion in the UK waiting to be spent. So hopefully that will ring
and
through.
this recovery, this crucial phase now, as you say, different sectors impacting different ways. Why community wealth building as part of that? Well,
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You said it means lots of things to lots of people, but essentially, if you spend £1 in your local area on a product made within your local area, all of the value of that pound is circulating in our economy. If you spend £1 in a local shop on something that was made in China, the margin that the retailer gets will be in the local community, but the rest of the value of that product is going offshore. And as a nation, I'll try not to get on a soapbox, but as a nation, we've done a fantastic job of offshoring everything. Our drive for consumption and our drive for everything to be ever cheaper has been amazingly facilitated by technology. I know that's part of what you're going to be talking about today, but Amazon, etc., have enabled people with a click to buy something that they want, even if they don't need it, get it tomorrow and pay very little for it. Unfortunately, the little they do pay for it has largely been going offshore, which is why the Chinese economy has been growing rapidly for the last 20 odd years. And our economy has been relying on services, etc., etc. So for me, community wealth building is essential if we're going to address a lot of the issues of inequality within our communities, create jobs for young people. We need to start making things again. We do make things, and that's part of the challenge, is the things we do make aren't necessarily visible. So SupplyDevon, Southwest Foods Hub, which we talked about later, if we can use that technology in a positive way to help driving people to products and services which are made here, are competitive and of good quality, then I think that's really important.
Thank you, Karl. Yeah, and of course, we've had this great digital shove these last 15, 16 months in terms of thinking about technology and how we can use it in many different ways. People are putting things in the session chat. So if you're on the chat and you're talking between the event and session, let's all head to this. You can read the session. That's where Andrew and Rebecca and Chris and Gina and other people are putting in information, links, and comments and questions as well for the panel as well. So Chris, let's turn to you then. The role of social enterprises. What is that role when it comes to community wealth building?
Well, I have to be, Karl has just said that community wealth building means different things to different people. The focus for me, because it's the focus of our organisation, and Torbay Council has instigated a community wealth building process, which I have to say was a great delight to find that they were doing it. I'm fortunate enough to be on that board, so I can see what's going on. And social enterprise actually has many different ways of supporting community wealth building. One of them is in terms of local procurement. In Torbay, the anchor institutions, so the hospital trust, the college, the council itself, are working to increase, as Karl was just saying, the amount of their money which they spend locally. That's fine as the bottom down bit, but you need the top up bit, because there are a lot of very small organisations. I think quite often more traditional competing with each other. Social enterprise are used to collaborating with each other, to working together, and therefore we're working with them to try to make it more possible for them to actually bid for some of this work.
How do you actually enable that then? Is it about putting people together, kind of understanding each other's point of views as part of different, some of these smaller organisations? Because there are various niches, which is wonderful, but also it makes it quite hard to be united and perhaps bring about change.
It does, absolutely. We run a Torbay social enterprise network, which gives them opportunities to come together and to learn from each other and to collaborate. We also focus on funding into Torbay so that we can help to develop either particular sectors of social enterprise or businesses to grow from some of the more deprived areas in Torbay. The other thing that that can work is things like not just social CICs, but also co-ops. So things like community land trusts, we're looking into setting up and building trusts, which means that we can start to move away from the model of properties being owned by offshore organisations who have no interest in the local economy at all. The other thing that's worth saying about social enterprises is that by their very legal nature, they're not allowed to build up a big business and then sell it on to somebody else somewhere else who takes the profit out of it. It has to remain in that local area.
Destiny is in your own hands, as it were.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I'm going to jump back to Karl before coming to Stuart. One big part of this is achieving local supply chains, and what was Yo Valley's experience of working with the local supply chain in terms of how you found that? Because we all kind of would love to do that, but perhaps some of us are a bit lazy about it, or think actually, how do you kind of embed that into your organisation?
Because we're a dairy producer, our major ingredient is obviously milk, which tends to come out of cows and has got a short life.
Yeah,
it always comes out of cows. It doesn't tend to come out. And we need a short supply chain to maintain the integrity of that product and to maintain the quality, etc., etc. So we've worked. Yo Valley's been going for just over 50 years and has always been working with local farmers to supply its products.
So we learn it for other sectors, in terms of that, how you build that, that localness and embed it into the supply chain.
Sorry, did you say that again, Dan?
There must be lessons to learn there, because the Southwest being that rural region, and there's, because for tech, for example, it is easy to kind of, you can look at other options elsewhere, and if you're not doing the due diligence, then you can be led down all sorts of different decision making.
Absolutely, it is a challenge. I mean, as we know, we've got a global food production supply chain. Unfortunately, some of the products that we have to use, some of the fruits we use for flavour can't be grown in the UK. Pineapple and mango, two which spring to mind. But you've got to make sure that you've got the same rigours and processes and accreditation and document trains for those, as well as you do for something in the UK. It does make a difference. The closer things are, the easier it is to manage overall. And one of our key missions is to support British family farms, not just for the farmers, but for the jobs that they create, the security it gives to our employees, the jobs it creates for our employees. So for us, it's in our DNA. We didn't set up one day and go, right, we're going to start creating short supply chains. We've always tried to have them as far as we possibly could. And during the pandemic, it's been great to be able to use Applegate and Stuart's company to help us source PPE at a time of crisis. So at the very beginning, food manufacturers had to keep going, had to feed the nation. The world would stop turning without yogurt. So it's really important that the facility that Applegate provide was fantastic in helping us source product.
Yeah. So that's a really neat point to then turn to you, Stuart, in terms of, so we've touched on food, supply chain, local buying power, the social enterprises, and how you can bring these different organisations together, and what has all this got to do with technology?
Very good question. So it's clear there's massive appetite across the Southwest for working more within the local community, and that comes from councils, colleges, universities, hospital trusts, from corporates as well, which is actually quite interesting. And that's a change. I don't think one would have seen that a while ago. But working in the local economy in the Southwest means working with small and medium-sized businesses, with social enterprises, as Chris was saying, with collectives, and that creates a challenge, because that means you've got a lot of entities out there. And for the larger purchasing organizations, they've got the question of, how do you find these organizations, these suppliers? How do you manage them? How do you work out which will be relevant to respond to a particular purchasing request? How do you keep the audit trail of what's going on? And how do you make it really easy for the suppliers? Because it's commonly the case that smaller entities are put off by scary government purchasing portals and take one look and then understandably run for the hills. And all of these things are where technology can provide the answer.
Okay, so that's sort of the big picture. Then how then in practice then the initiative that is SupplyDevon actually support community wealth building? How does it actually happen?
Yes, so the origins of this actually goes back to something Karl was mentioning. At the start of the pandemic, we realized there was clearly desperate shortage of PPE, and that led to the COVID-19 Supply Hub as a non-commercial, non-profit initiative, which ended up from March last year delivering over 1 billion items of PPE. And from that set the thought of what else could happen. SupplyDevon is a joint initiative of Exeter University, Geiston and Applegate, funded by the government under the Sustainable Innovation Fund. And how it works is it uses machine learning, so artificial intelligence, where the system learns and constantly reprograms itself from that learning to work out which suppliers are suitable for a particular purchasing need. It makes it very easy for the supplier to respond, so it hides the complexity. It provides all the audit trail for the purchasing organization. It draws the data across from companies' house via the API, so it makes it easy to onboard smaller suppliers, which is often a challenge for purchasing teams. And very importantly, and this is brilliant work by the academics at Exeter, it rebalances the supply chain, the suppliers invited to bid, to ensure they're reflective of the ethnic and gender diversity in the supply base. So it ensures that minority ethnic, female-owned businesses are getting a fair crack of the whip. It doesn't automatically give them the business, but it gives them the chance to bid, the chance to win, which is really important for improving equality within the region. And also, again, thanks to the wizardry of the academics, for the purchasing organizations, it then calculates what they've added to the local economy in terms of GVA and the carbon emissions they've averted by shortening their supply chains, as Karl was referring to, and by doing more of their purchasing locally when possible.
Okay, I get it. So there's a whole that's incredibly complex behind the scenes, but actually what that is then doing is in terms of clarity, in terms of decision making and audit trails, and selecting your chosen supplier, etc., and building that whole, because part of this, it's this whole idea of community wealth building, it's built on foundations going back a long time actually, in terms of localness. Karl talks about obviously agriculture, it's embedded in the way it works. It has to be in terms of looking local and short turnaround times, etc. But the technology, I guess it can, when you start talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, again, it's really key. It's got to be as simple as possible for smaller organizations to be able to access that, because just the procurement I experience on looking at county council methods and forms and the things we have to provide, it's complex. The scoring, everyone has their own different models. Is technology opportunity to actually simplify that, to kind of streamline it and make it as fair as possible? That's what you're saying.
Yes, and I think we should be sympathetic to our colleagues in the councils. They operate under
they are the rules.
State rules. Yeah, and actually it was a change by the Cabinet Office, PPN 11/20, issued in December last year, that now gives them authority to favour local procurement in a way that wasn't possible to the same extent previously. But as you say, good technology, and James asked in the chat, will
Yeah.
we enjoy using this? I hope so, because good technology is about taking the complexity away, about hiding that behind the scenes and making it simpler. And I think that should do that. I'm tempted to say that SupplyDevon stayed working today despite the fact that Amazon's gone down. Maybe that says something, I don't know. But there's a broader point. And there's a question about, will this be apolitical? And which I think is really, really important, because it's very easy for something like community wealth building to feel like it's a siloed matter. And as we've got, in this meeting here today, it's public sector, private sector, technology, academics, campaign groups. It's when all come together that you can really make this work. And any one of those without all of them, is unlikely to get very far. So I think it is this coming together, maybe even a post-pandemic thing. Perhaps we are more open to getting out of our silos, keener to engage, and maybe that could be some of the good that could come.
Chris, have you seen that from your side in terms of, the shake-up we have had and some of the really tough times these last year and a half? But are you seeing, willingness more open, collaborate, more in this together? Are you seeing that at that local level?
Yeah, we certainly are. As I said before, social enterprises are always more likely to work together, but the ones who have struggled the most have been helped with others. There's also been a massive shift in terms of the voluntary and community sector, where I think in lots of places they really came to the fore to support, telephone support and so on. But what's happening here in the Bay, which is so great, is that a lot of those things are now being made permanent. That's what it looks like. It's not going back again. They know now that they can achieve so much more by working together than they ever could before. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that if anything will continue to develop. It certainly won't go backwards.
Yeah. And no, it's really interesting. And just turning to the poll, which a fair few people have taken, it's quite interesting. Actually, let's read out the question. So, community wealth building has a number of benefits. Which of these do you feel is most important to the region right now? So, actually, it's not. It's kind of protecting the environment is at the top, and then growing the local economy, and then helping the Southwest bounce back from the impacts of the pandemic specifically. So, people still can take that poll, but it just kind of shows, even with the tough time the economy has had, that environmental aspect of this is kind of seems to be, I wouldn't say enshrined, but a fundamental element to every strand of this. That is something that does cut across all these different elements of it, because it is bringing it back to the local, isn't it? So I suppose one of the things around that, maybe this is a question for Karl, is the Southwest uniquely placed, or does the Southwest have something about it in our kind of makeup, our assets, that thinks, yes, this is good community wealth building, we're building on a foundation here, or there are certain qualities in the Southwest that we kind of love. We love living and working in a place it's beautiful as the Southwest. But is there anything in terms of the communities, or am I being a bit naive around that?
No, I don't think so. I think everybody on this panel, hopefully all the people watching, would agree that it's a great place to live. The CBI issued their regional scorecards recently, and out of the 9 regions which they do, so the Southwest would be up to South Gloss, etc., so the old RDA region, we scored really high. We were the highest one for life satisfaction, but we're probably the lowest for economic productivity, etc., etc. So we're really happy, but we don't make much. I'm
very sweet, but yes, I know you mean. Yeah.
So we've got some amazing natural assets here, as we all know, the coastline, and we've got a lot of grass and greenland and moorlands and AO and Bs. We've got a very rapidly aging population compared to the rest of the country. I think our average age is 10 years older than the rest of the UK. One of our challenges is how we balance the required economic growth that we need to sustain the communities, whilst maintaining and protecting and enhancing the environment, and dealing with the fact that a lot of people who are here with a high life satisfaction don't actually want anything to change. So we've got a lot of conflicting issues.
Yeah.
But the basic premise, which I go back to at the beginning, was if you spend more of your pounds in your local area on goods and services made and produced in your local area, whether you're an individual, whether you're a business or a local government or a public procurement, that will ultimately, I know that's purely financial community wealth building, but that will circulate that money in that area, and you can do more with it. And I know South West Food Hub will be involved later on. That's a classic example of how the government money and the public spend on food and drink for our schools, our prisons, our hospitals, our universities can make a massive difference into generating wealth and benefiting the environment on a local basis with short supply chains, etc.
Yeah, and of course, a big part of it is awareness, education, how we engage with people and communities, because the pressure on politicians, on councillors, on organisations, on your employer to pay, that can come from different areas. I hope you can still hear me. I'm getting the sound in the background. But maybe it's a question for you, Stuart. That is a huge thing, isn't it, in terms of engaging with, Devon is it's 1 million plus people just in Devon alone, and to kind of, because this is so universal, so many different ways, and this is where you ultimately spend your money as a key decision that every family and every adult and young person has. That takes time. But what is the approach? Chipping away, engaging, kind of looking at the alternatives, contrasting it with global supply chains, or what is it?
So it's not always going to be the right decision to buy locally. It could be that the right quality or the best value in totality, or even the lowest environmental footprint solution comes from elsewhere. But I think what platforms like South West Food Hub and SupplyDevon can do is to make it very easy for purchasing organisations, whether that's county council, unitary authority, district, college, university, corporate, whoever, to give the opportunity locally. They don't necessarily have to select a local supplier if that's not right. But there are two things that does. Firstly, to do that in an efficient manner means you will find suppliers that you're unaware of. And we're seeing that already, and seeing that with one of the NHS trusts, who was something they thought couldn't be done in Devon. They found 8 suppliers in Devon bidding for the work. So you'll find new ones. But also the other thing that can do is it shows suppliers, even if they can't fulfill it, that the demand is there. So often a business, particularly after the last 18 months, as we've been talking about being so tough, you're thinking about, do I buy that new machine which would enable me to make a particular type of product? I'm nervous. I've been through the ringer over the last 18 months. I'm not sure about it. But then if you see that there are requests coming out, even if you can't fulfill them, that actually gives you the information that there are people locally purchasing that may give you the confidence to make that investment. And it comes back to what Karl was saying. We have low productivity in the area. We've had low investment in plant, in new technology and so forth. And this hopefully could help give people the confidence to make that change.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to turn to a couple of the comments and questions from the chat, because there's lots of them, so thank you. So Jude, do you think the change, brackets impact of COVID, more home working, people looking more at where they live, not where they work, etc., from central London, city employment, provides an opportunity for us in the Southwest to strengthen our local supplier market due to a change in where people are working from? Who'd like to answer that? Oh, great, thank you, Karl. Yeah, I mean, and of course, there's going to be this shift, and we're seeing it, and it's sort of, okay, how do we kind of take advantage of that? And yeah, as Jude says, the growth in the breadth of types of services, products, goods available for us directly from the Southwest, and there are these amazing stories that have popped up during the pandemic of, across the region, of people moving in, but also people not having access to certain markets, like fishermen jumping on Facebook Messenger, being able to order live from the boats, basically, and then dropping off parcels because it's not going up to the restaurants in London. That was talking to, tech people who were helping fishermen in Cornwall just pivot. They were pivoting, they were being agile, and that's what industries, sectors do, isn't it? So that is universal basic income part of the solution, asked Chris Woodfield. again, that's another whole, our final 5 minutes before we go on to the next panel discussion is a complex one, but yeah, no, really good point. I think we're on the cusp of huge levels of opportunity. So Zoe, is how this message is delivered to support the changes in living and buying habits. I mean, that is a key thing, isn't it? We've learned that in the pandemic, actually, in terms of you can do one-off things, but getting into habits and technology, I suppose, in terms of supporting it, because when the method works, we are then encouraged, and the feedback loop is we try it again, and that at an organisational level, is a key thing, but also as people within our environments. Quite a few people are putting things in the chat around, reducing emissions, climate emergencies, moving towards carbon neutral, and it's got to be a central part of community wealth building. Can the panelists discuss growth and productivity in this context? So let's finish on that then. It's in the context of kind of, protecting the environment and moving towards carbon neutral in this climate emergency. Perhaps we have one final thought from each of your perspectives. So Karl, from that kind of regional perspective and the agricultural side, is it a fundamental part of it? Is it on the priority list?
I mean, yes, it is a very good question. It goes to the heart of much of what we need to do here in the South. We've got a fantastic opportunity down here to grow our economy through renewable energy, floating offshore wind, solar, etc. We're doing some amazing work using digital and tech on autonomous marine in Plymouth and Smart Sound. We've got photonics in. We've got massive opportunities here, which will all help the economy. Getting the balance right needs to be met with consumption changes. We need to see the shift to electric vehicles and decarbonisation of our transport. We're a lovely place to live in, but it's a nightmare to drive around. Everything's on fossil fuels, and we've got a massive footprint because of that. So to encourage consumers to switch over to electric vehicles, we need investment in infrastructure and EV charging points. We need electrification of our mainline railways, etc., etc. So it is a great point. It's too long for 4 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever's left. But it's what we're trying to grapple with, and our blueprint for green growth from the LEP does set out. So I'd recommend anybody goes to our Heart of the Southwest LEP website and downloads that, and that gives an idea of the direction we're trying to go in.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karl. Thank you, Gina, for being so swift on the putting the link in the chat. Fantastic. So Chris, from your perspective, in terms of that environmental element to the work that you're doing as a social enterprise, and how fundamental is it?
It's absolutely fundamental, because the working with live here. This is their future that we're talking about. It's not some theoretical thing that might happen one day. And I think people are recognizing that more and more. Conversations are really changing now. And I think that's one of the things where maybe some of the changes that we've had to make for COVID can actually teach us that living a different way can actually be a good thing. I know lots of people have really struggled with it, but we've had a lot of contact from people who've spent their time maybe on furlough, thinking really hard about what they want to do with their lives in the future and the changes that they want to make. And I find that heartening. I think that's something we can build on, because I think there's a risk that if we focus purely on tech solutions and on growing our way through this, that there are massive questions over that, whether that's actually realistic. We have to change our behaviour, and we've now all learned that we can change our behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I'll let Stuart sort of come back on that point. But yeah, it's not a one size fits all, and it's not a one. We've got to throw ourselves into this in so many different ways, into technology, habits, individuals, organisational, local, regional, national, international, and the hyper local, what you want to call it. So all these things, but the groundswell, it does seem to be progressing, and the last 16-18 months have certainly brought a lot of thinking and changing, but it's about carrying on, of course, from that. So final thought from you, Stuart, and our final 35 seconds summing up the wide-ranging discussion.
So and Jay's question is a brilliant one and probably deserves about an hour, which we're not going to have right now, but maybe something to pick up on. I think to Chris's point, at the start of the pandemic, I was really fearful that the environment would get shoved down. Right, there's a new crisis, forget about that. And it really hasn't happened. And as Chris says, it's the opposite. There's now a greater willingness to engage, which is not something I'd anticipated, but it is a really positive outcome, actually, of a horrendous situation we've been in. To Karl's point, we are in a situation here that there's potential through floating offshore wind in particular, plus other forms of renewable, to have a very high volume of green electricity, not just for our own needs, but beyond. So shortening supply chains for the things which we need, which the public sector needs, private sector needs, isn't just actually about reducing the emissions of transport. It's potentially also about reducing emissions in manufacture by using greener energy to produce things here that can't be produced in such a low emissions way elsewhere. So I think that there is a huge potential, and I think this is actually a very optimistic moment.
Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Karl, and thank you, Stuart. And yeah, the questions keep coming in, but how is the nuclear spaceport green development for Cornwall? Yeah, that's a very interesting debate, and you have to play the long game around that in terms of the technological advances to demonstrate, that. So that's yeah. But we've run out of time in this first panel, but do stick around, everyone. The method to join the second panel: we click on the session on the left-hand side. You click leave from this session, and then it's topic 2, basically. So we'll be there in 30 seconds, and then that runs for about half an hour. And then for those who are able to hang around, there's networking at the end, which is literally clicking on the networking left-hand side, and you'll connect with one other person and just have a one-to-one, like a mini Zoom call for 3 or 4 minutes. Then it throws you out again, and you can dive back in. So thank you, Stuart. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Karl. There's only so much we can pack in into 30 minutes, but that's fantastic and wide-ranging. And thanks, everyone, for the questions. Let's keep it going in panel 2. So we'll click on sessions. And see you there in panel 2 with our new lineup in a second. Thank you.